90% of the people I studied made less than $50 a month, but they were getting ideas through television, through the internet, through mass media. So cultures don't have clear boundaries, but also these different domains in culture leak into each other. They shape each other. And up on this slide, I have religion and science, politics, but we could also add disability, maybe, or the body, or health to that as well. And one great way I remind my students about this when I'm teaching about culture is I tell them, how many ways are there to make a baby in America? And they'll think about it for a bit, and then they'll say, there's two. You can give birth to a baby, a woman gets pregnant and gives birth to a baby, or you adopt a baby. I mean, those are the two ways that you make a family. You have children through birth, or you have children through adoption. And then I say, well, how many ways are there to become a citizen in the United States? And then they think about that, and then they say, well, there's two. You're either born in America or you become naturalized. What an interesting word that is. You become natural. It's sort of like you get adopted by America. And then they say, well, wait a second. There's two ways to make a family, and there's two ways to make a citizen, and they're sort of the same two ways. And I say, yeah, isn't that interesting? And isn't it interesting that our word nation comes from the word natal, like neonatal, meaning child? So that our ways of thinking about families shape the ways that we think about citizenship, because these domains influence each other. And so something that I think is really interesting to think about is that ideas about the body and about disability and about the mind and about health, they aren't bounded either. They leak and they influence other domains. And to me, that's one reason why it's so important to learn from and talk to persons with disabilities, is not only because of their rights and their struggles, that's obviously important, but because people with disabilities have something to teach everyone. Because the world of disability isn't sealed off from the rest of the world. It's part of our bigger culture, whether people realize it or not. So the topic for this wonderful two-day conference is a community of communities. So let's talk about community. It's actually a really hard word to define. And a lot of languages, a lot of cultures have no word for community. There's really no word for community in Indonesia. There's a word for neighborhood, and there's a word for like society, and there's a word for like people, if you said the Indonesian people, but there's not really a good word for community. Sometimes they'll say comunitas, they'll use the English word basically, but there's really not an exact term for it. So there's a traditional definition of what community is. And that idea of community is usually people imagine like a little village, a small community. Maybe it's like us sitting here at Virtual Ability Island, where everyone knows everyone. It's like the song from Cheers, right? Where everyone knows your name. Um, but it's not just families, right? It's more than just blood relations. The community typically is also about friendship and something a little bit bigger, but still you sort of know who people are. And everyone maybe goes to the same church, and there's a baker that everyone goes to get their bread, right? There's some shared institutions in that sense, a school, shared interests, and usually there's an idea that the community is pretty homogenous in the sense that everyone speaks the same language or has the same ethnic identity. It's not very multicultural typically. I'm not saying this is true, right? I'm saying this is the stereotype. This is the old definition of community. but it still influences, I think, how people talk about community today. Is they get this, the sound of music, traditional idea of a little village in the valley kind of idea of community. And of course, there are communities like that in the world. I'm not saying they don't exist, but the word community is now used to mean a lot more than just that traditional idea. So, one newer idea of community that people talk about nowadays is the idea of an identity based community. So, if someone says that law is not very friendly to the gay community, they are not imagining that a bunch of gay people are in a little village all going to the same baker. There are a few big cities that maybe have what people call a gay ghetto, right? Where the gay bars are or something, but it's usually assumed most gay people don't live like that. Um, what it is it just means the community of people who share that identity. It doesn't really fit most ideas of the traditional definition. And on purpose, I put gay community here as an example, but obviously we could stick in disability community and think about that, right? That idea of community of communities. Because, of course, there are some cases where persons with disabilities live close to each other, even live in a shared house or shared facility. But then, of course, there are persons with disabilities who are quite isolated in the physical world. Maybe they only connect with other people with disabilities online. Are they part of a community? I think the answer, of course, is yes and no. They're part of a different kind of community. And I think the whole idea of community of communities is hitting on this idea. In what ways are communities of persons with disabilities, in some cases, more like that older idea that's still around? In what cases is it more like an identity based community? And I don't have a perfect answer, right? Because I myself am beginning this research, which is so fun. I love it when I don't have the answers, because then we can talk about it, right? I just think it's a really interesting issue. Another newer idea of community that's come around is the idea of the imagined community. And a political scientist, Benedict Anderson, wrote a famous book about this. The idea of if I'm an American, I'm part of this community of Americans, even though there's many US states I've never been to. I won't meet most Americans, but I have this sense all people will go to war and die for their fellow Americans that they'll never meet. It's not like they have the same baker or go to the same church. It's an imagined community, but it's very, very real. And when Benedict Anderson wrote about this, he emphasized the importance of technology in the form of newspapers to the rise of the modern nation. Because people don't realize that the idea of the nation is really only about 300 years old in this modern definition. You had kingdoms and empires before then, but that was very different, right? You could imagine the British Empire someday controlling the whole world, right? The sun never sets on the British Empire. But as Benedict Anderson noted, no nation imagines itself as equal to all humankind. Brazilians don't imagine a world where everyone is Brazilian. Japanese don't imagine a world where everyone is Japanese. So the nation form is limited in a really interesting way. So those are two newer ideas of community that I think could be really interesting to talk about in relation to ideas of disability. And then, of course, a third new idea of community that has come into being in the last 20 years, 10 years especially, of course, is virtual community. Howard Rheingold was one of the first people to popularize that notion, but many people have written and talked about that. I have as well, that we can have virtual communities. And we're sitting in one right now. In this room, there can be people from the United States, Germany, Australia, Indonesia, all over the world, we will probably never all be in the same room in the physical world. And but we could learn from each other in this room. I could fall in love with one of you. I could pay one of you money for an avatar shirt or for whatever, and that money is real. And that relationship is real. And that love is very real. It could have effects back in the physical world. In all of my books, I never talk actually about the virtual world and the real world, even though when I'm typing quickly, I might say RL. I always say something like virtual world and physical world because it's all real. We don't want to have a definition of reality that has no computers in it and has no internet in it, because that reality will have very little to do with the reality of the world today, right? And human beings have always had a virtual aspect to our lives, ever since we've told stories, had myths, had languages, right? You can't touch a language. It's a very virtual thing. But what's new and different about these virtual communities is a really interesting question. And it links up to these questions of method, because I resist the idea that for me to research this community, let's say the community of us sitting together right now on this island, that I would have to get in a plane and fly to where all of you are and interview you in the physical world, face to face. Because this is a kind of face to face. And we don't have to meet in the physical world to be communicating right now. And so as a researcher, I have to follow that reality. That doesn't mean that there aren't some research projects where you don't want to go talk to people in the physical world as well. I'm not saying that, of course, but that you don't always have to do it. It depends on what it is you're trying to study. And a big question, and I've written a book on this and I still don't know the answer, which, like I said, is awesome. I love not knowing the answers, is how is this virtual community we're living in right now different or similar to those older ideas of community? In some ways, it's sort of retro. It's almost like that old village idea of community, which I think is really interesting. But in some ways, it can be an identity-based community. And in some ways, it can be a kind of imagined community, obviously. It could maybe be all three in different cases. That's why I love the title of this conference, A Community of Communities. Because most people in this world belong to multiple communities. It'd be very hard to find someone who belongs to only one. And those communities can have different scales. They can be local, they can be national, they can be networks. So in my hometown, I have a community. I'm part of, I'm an American citizen. That's another community. Anthropologists, maybe like a professional community. We all live in multiple communities. And when we think about communities of disability, right? Persons with disability, what different kinds of communities are they in at the same time, right? Is a really interesting question that I don't have the answer to, which I think is wonderful. So to wrap up, and this is my last slide, because on purpose I wanted to leave time to chat at the end, because I'm really interested in having a discussion. So how can we use these different ideas around community to think about the idea of disability community, of disability communities, of a community of communities? And when we do this, one thing I would always want to emphasize is to not worry too much about the terms, because no term is ever perfect, right? So sometimes people say, oh, should we say virtual worlds or online worlds or metaverse or cyber world or whatever? And I often say, we need synonyms. It's great to have more than one word for something, because words are never perfect matches for reality. They're tools that help us understand reality, but they're never perfect. And we'll go crazy if we try and find the perfect term. That's not going to happen. But we can find better terms, right? Some are better, some are less helpful. And how can we use these different concepts of community to think about communities of disability online and offline? How can we compensate for aspects of it that might not be so helpful? How can we think about the potential of online communities for persons with disabilities in all kinds of ways, and maybe perils as well? Technology is neutral in the sense that it's about what we do with it, right? We all know you can do good or bad things with technology. It's never a savior that's going to make our lives perfect, and it's never a monster that's going to destroy everything. We're the savior of the monster, right? It's what we do together that makes these virtual worlds good or bad. And frankly, it's what we do together that makes life in the physical world good or bad. And so at this point in my life and my path, I'm in a real question space where I'm beginning a journey of learning and thinking about these questions. And I invite you all to be part of that journey in the sense of, I think, virtual worlds are still so new. There's still so much we don't understand about them, and technology is changing so fast. And it's really important that we always remember that technology is about human beings, the people who make it, design it, use it, and experience it. Technology is always about culture. Technology and culture should be like technoculture, like some mashed together word, because they're always part of each other. And the better that we get an understanding of the culture of these communities, of these online lives, the better we'll be able to think about the technology and how to use it to make all of our lives better. So thank you all so much. This was such an honor to be able to participate in this. This has been just wonderful. Please do get the free copies of my books. Here's my website. Feel free to go onto my website and check it out if you would like. And we have about 20 minutes, a little bit less, for Q&A. And I have not been looking at the chat because I would get distracted, but I know there have been like 500 awesome things. And so if there's someone who would like to maybe manage the Q&A, you can just type them up to me on the chat, and I can talk back to it, or however you would prefer. Hi, Gentle.
That we will definitely want to read aloud before we, I'm hearing feedback, sorry. We'll read aloud before you answer. So let's see what we have for questions.
Great. Yes, I can read back the questions as well.
That's better.
Well, you started off with a biggie, Gentle. My gosh. So Gentle asked the wonderful, but also terrifying question: is there a disability community in any sense of the term? Oh my gosh. Well, I'm not going to have an easy answer. And Gentle is maybe getting some feedback. I think, Gentle, do you still have your mic on? Or Emmy, I think someone has their mic on. That might be what it is. Oh, and Mohammed, I said terrifying, not terrible. So don't worry. It's not that it's a bad question. It's a wonderful question. I think that the you saying in any sense of the term is the right way. In an abstract way, I guess you can say there is a disability community. You could say there is an African American community in the United States, but you would then immediately have to say, well, an African American person living in a small town in California and an African American person who is living in a penthouse in Atlanta are not really part of the same community except in a very general sense. So, in a very general sense, if you're talking about that identity definition, then yes, everyone who has a disability is part of a disability community. But in terms of most people's everyday experience, that probably doesn't really reflect everyday experience. But also, an important point that came out of Nola's talk too is communities are political, and sometimes if you're arguing for political rights, you need to talk about the disability community perhaps, or the gay community wants to have equal rights, or the African American community wants to be sure that this or that. So in that sense, especially around political organizing, you don't want to fragment yourself, right? About a general community. So I think there are cases where you can do it, um, because you can have multiple communities. That's why I love your title for this conference. It doesn't have to be either or, it can be both and. That's the best I can do on that question. It's a great question, but it's a biggie. So Sista Abeyente asks, I'm often struck by the fact that many, including in academia, marginalize the disability community, even among the subset of other marginalized cultural, ethnic, or other groups. Do you have any insights as to why we're sometimes so on the margin, we are even invisible among the marginalized? Um, that's another really good question. Wow, and another hard one. So I will try to answer that. But gosh, that's a really good question. Um, so gosh, I think that one one reason, actually going back to Nola's earlier talk, there's been a lot of one reason the disability community can appear invisible is because it's so varied, and because it's not always a community that you're born into. So if you take a group of persons with disabilities, you have people with visible disabilities, less visible disabilities they've had from birth. But I can't remember the percent, but only 15% or something of persons with disabilities have it from birth. Physical, emotional, mental disabilities. And so in some ways, perhaps it's hard for people to see a common denominator that as being part of a community. Um, that's yes, because like I said, I really don't have a good, clear answer for that, because persons with disabilities have been advocating for visibility and inclusion for a long time. So it's not like the advocacy has been happening. Um, gosh, I really don't have a better answer. One quick idea I'm talking off the top of my head here is, this is just a guess. From I'm interested in what I'm doing right now, is that maybe sometimes people think that if you're talking about disability, it's only talking about helping people with disabilities. And so it gets put into a kind of fix-it thing where you're just trying to figure out how to help people who have disabilities. And that is, of course, a really important issue. But maybe people haven't thought enough about how the struggles of people with disabilities have teach us all, in a way that for a longer period of time, people have thought about, if you look at the oppression of people of color, that can teach us all, even white people, a lot. If you look at sexism, that can teach men a lot, right? And I actually love that term, and of people who are temporarily able-bodied. I think that is actually valuable, because anyone could be disabled at any moment. And that in a very powerful way, we are born disabled and we will pass out this world disabled. It is not, we shouldn't think of it as a community that is cut off. You know what I'm saying? And I don't mean in saying that to deny the experience persons with disabilities. Please don't misunderstand. I'm just trying to think out loud about one reason why maybe persons with disabilities have been marginalized is because it's been medicalized and treated as a problem to try and fix rather than a community from whom we can learn. These are great questions. Lee has a question. Tom, did you find many communities in Second Life lack the hierarchical structures of many physical world structures of communities? Does this help the formalization of formal and informal communities in virtual worlds? Well, that's a really interesting question too. Well, I think you develop in Second Life, and what's so interesting is then how that affected the design of the virtual world and the because the folks who, the Lindens who created Second Life, I know that they originally thought of groups as something more like fan clubs. But then as you got these big groups in Second Life that were organizing big events and managing 100 different islands, they had to make all these group tools where you have leaders who can modify objects and other people don't. And it can actually get remarkable in terms of the groups, right? But then you also have so many informal communities in Second Life because, you can only small out. You could run away, but you can't log out. And so I think that has affected things and that you have a lot of informal Second Life, but there are some very hierarchical groups in Second Life, not necessarily even in a bad sense, but just to get things done. Virtual ability has a hierarchy to it, and it has group membership roles that they need to do all these amazing things that they do. And it's really interesting to see how even the group tools have had to be redesigned for to allow that to happen. So it seems like you see the both of those kinds of things happening. And in other virtual worlds, like ones that are more gaming oriented, like Worlds of Warcraft, you can see very complicated guild structures where, in order to go on a raid and kill that big boss, kill that big monster, you have to have an incredible amount of hierarchy and organization in the guild, or else everyone gets killed. So it's not unique to Second Life. You can get those kinds of things.
Come on.
There might have been another question that I missed. I'm sorry if there was. Go ahead and Claudia has a question. Would logging out be more similar to going home or taking a trip? Yeah, I mean, it depends on what logging out means, because logging out could just be for a day or two. But, in my book, I mentioned, an example, and many of you have probably heard of similar examples of, I know a case of partners in Second Life who were very close. And one partner said, I have to log off real quick to get the ice off of my car, and didn't log back in for 3 months. And the partner actually knew no physical world information about the person, had no way to contact them. And it turned out they got called away for a family emergency where they didn't have internet access. But that's like leaving a community. So it depends on what logging off means, because there are cases of people, of course, who never come back or only come back on occasion. And then, of course, people log off and then 3 hours later they're back. That's different. We have 6 minutes left, so we can probably have one or two more questions, and then I can always stay around and talk to people one-on-one, and I'm always happy to come back and talk again. This is really wonderful.
I think Zinnia has the last question. Do you think virtual worlds can help? Well, her question just disappeared. Do you think virtual worlds can help develop perspectives on other cultures by our experiences in world?
Right, that's a great question. And also, Keel just had a tag thing that that Keel, the depending on the online world, if it's Eve Online or World of Warcraft or whatever, there's different levels of hierarchy or strictness to the community. But there obviously has to be kinds of coordination. So it really depends on the kind of guild and the kind of virtual world. So that's a very good point. And then the last question: do you think virtual worlds can develop perspective of other cultures by experiences in world? I mean, that's a there's been some really interesting examples of that possibly being the case, right? I mean, are there ways that we could use virtual worlds to try and get an appreciation for other cultures, where you can have, there have been experiments using islands in Second Life to have Palestinians and Israelis together, or to learn more about what it means to be Mormon, or to learn more what it's like to have a disability or to be a different gender, or recreation of Stan or of the prison as ways to give people a kind of immersive experience, kind of reality that maybe they would be willing to take a risk that they wouldn't be able to do even if they went to that place in the physical world. I'm willing to maybe go on a vacation to China, but maybe not to go there and become a woman. But instead, I might try being female for a week. What does that do? What is the blowback of that on our physical world lives? Better understanding. The military uses virtual worlds for those kinds of things, and there does seem to be evidence that it can be um, helpful, helpful about that. Um, so that's a really good question. And I think virtual worlds are still so new, we don't know the whole answer to that, but there's a lot of evidence that it can do that for some people in some cases. Absolutely. So it's a really interesting, exciting possibility. I mean, for me as an anthropologist, obviously, if we could get greater cultural understanding through virtual worlds, how awesome is that? So that's something that we need to learn more about. There are some great examples where that certainly seems to be the case. So and yeah, someone just mentions PTSD as an example of that, where there's been some really interesting evidence about that. So there are actually a lot of interesting examples. It appears to be an interesting possibility. So there were several other really interesting points. Actually, Bathsheba just made a great point, comment that I'm going to do a last comment on, because I know it's almost 12. Then after that, I'll step off the podium. We can talk one-on-one. So the Bathsheba's last question mentions, what about blind and visually impaired participation in virtual worlds? A lot of people debate about that kind of issue and immersion. That is an awesome question, and it's something I talk about in my book. There's an interesting way in which vision, and to a lesser degree sound, equated with immersion and with this idea of the virtual world is entirely smell. You could have something like, those special gloves or that kind of thing. Or you could have one that was only sound. You could have a virtual world that's only sound, right? The virtual worlds, buds, right? Like Lambda Mu, only text. The reality is that now in 2012, in the real world, almost all virtual worlds are very biased towards vision. They are very vision oriented. But what makes a virtual world is a sense of shared place, that we are on this island and I could log off and this island is still here. And that could be because of sound. It wouldn't just have to be because of vision. So there is a real issue for people who are blind or visually impaired in that there is a big bias towards vision in almost all virtual worlds and online games, and that links to a bias towards vision in Western culture and beyond. It's like that in Indonesia as well, a real bias towards vision as the best of all the senses. But it would be awesome to develop a virtual world that is all sound, or one that is all touch. I mean, just to see what it would be like, because there's no reason that a virtual world has vision. Is that basically all are. So, and that is a real issue. And obviously a kind of happy medium, or another possibility is ways to make virtual worlds that are vision biased more friendly to people with visual impairments by making things bigger, easier to read, or having sound added to things, or, there's all kinds of possible ways that we could do that, so we could work with the reality that most virtual worlds are biased towards vision, and still make them more friendly to people with visual impairments. So it's one of those cases where it doesn't have to be that way, but the way the world is right now, I think if you look at 1,000 virtual worlds, 999 or 1,000 of them are going to be biased towards vision. I mean, it's incredible, the dominance and the dominance of vision in virtual worlds. And it's a very important point that we should think about more. Absolutely. So, once again, thanks to the organizers of this conference for inviting me. Thank you so much to all of you for these great questions. I'd be happy to come back to Virtual Ability Island anytime and talk more, or to talk to any of you more. This is really awesome.